The murder of JonBenet Ramsey, a 6-year-old beauty queen, stunned the globe and plagued authorities for decades after the fact. However, revolutionary DNA technology has now made it possible to put an end to the mystery. Unfortunately, everyone's expectations were wrong. Those familiar with the situation say the authorities are on the verge of finally solving the case after new, potentially game-changing evidence appeared. However, will fairness be ultimately achieved? Plus, the truth behind that fateful night and why the JonBenet Ramsey enigma has been answered at last. In case you were wondering, it's bad. New DNA evidence has rekindled hope of solving the murder of 6-year-old JonBenet Ramsey, which occurred more than 28 years ago. To set the stage, though, let's travel back 28 years to the time of the terrible case that sent shockwaves through the media and administration. The Ramsey family's December 1996 holiday preparations took a tragic turn for the worse. Colorado authorities discovered the body of 6-year-old JonBenet Ramsey in the basement of their house on December 26th. She had a skull fracture and a garrote, a device for strangulation, lodged in her neck, according to the post-mortem results. On top of that, a ransom note demanding $118,000, 0 cents, to release her from captivity was discovered. However, her corpse had been in the basement the whole time. When her father learnt she was gone, he contacted the police. After several hours of searching, they found her dead in the basement. To everyone's surprise, he brought her up in a sob, casting suspicion on the family. Many people were left to wonder about the mysterious ransom message and the absence of any indications of forced entry. Additionally, the crime scene was inadequately guarded, and the media played a significant role in the investigation. Everyone in the Ramsey family was thought to be involved with the case for a long time. The FBI's CODIS database was populated in 2003 with mixed amyl DNA recovered from JonBenet's underwear, which did not match any member of the Ramsey family. These DNA results, along with the public backing of Boulder's district attorney, led to the family's 2008 exoneration. In addition, the garrote and a blanket were among the many items found with unknown male DNA traces, which may indicate that the perpetrator had physical contact with the scene of the crime despite initial mistakes. Labs can now derive valuable profiles from these previously examined samples thanks to modern technology. Forensic genetic genealogy, which integrates DNA profiling with consumer genealogy databases, is largely responsible for the significant improvement authorities were able to identify the Golden State Killer in 2018 using this method, which led many to believe that it may be employed in the Ramsey investigation as well. It has been suggested to the authorities on numerous occasions by John Ramsey, JonBenet's father, that crucial pieces of evidence, like as the ransom letter, garrote, flashlight and underpants, be retested utilizing state-of-the-art laboratories capable of producing genealogy-ready profiles. The Benet's family claims that the authorities now have all the evidence necessary to finally bring the case to a close. The Ramsey family's belief that the police possess the crucial evidence necessary to solve the JonBenet Ramsey case has persisted for nearly 30 years. The girl's father, John Ramsey, has implored the police to deploy cutting-edge DNA testing methods in their pursuit of the murderer, saying time and again that the authorities have all the evidence they need. During a nearly 90-minute meeting in January 2025, John Ramsey, Boulder Police Chief Stephen Redfern, and a genetic genealogy specialist deliberated the best way to use these technologies to retest the objects found at the crime scene. Despite the passage of time, Chief Redfern and other officials have shown their dedication to solving the case by expressing a willingness to engage with the FBI and independent labs. John also suggested that they look into genealogical DNA, which has a 60–70% chance of identifying the killer. The issue of evidence contamination has caused the investigation to be postponed for many years, and this has caused considerable reluctance among investigating organizations. Still, officials are putting new testing standards into place, with backing from new leadership and public pressure from documentaries that have been airing recently. Also speaking out with conviction is John Andrew Ramsey, who is JonBenet's older half-brother. He claims that the matter can be resolved. Volunteers, he stressed, continue to work on the case every day because they have faith in a final result. The family's history was discussed openly by John Andrew in a recent interview. In addition to losing their sister Beth in a car crash, they had to deal with their mother Patsy's stage 4 cancer diagnosis. Another devastating calamity befell their family, one they could never have anticipated. As they were trying to cope with their sister's death, the public began to suspect that they were engaged in the MAA, which only made matters worse. He lamented the loss of his sister and daughter. Tragically, we found ourselves in a position where the individuals we had hoped would rescue us were instead casting blame on us. All of a sudden, our lives were completely turned upside down. We were just ordinary individuals. Additionally, John Andrew disclosed that the family was eventually exonerated in 2008, following 10 years of defense. All that's left, in his opinion, is for the police to quickly identify the correct culprit and begin prosecution by making use of contemporary forensic possibilities. Both Ramseys stand firm, stating that the authorities have the necessary untested DNA and other evidence to solve the riddle. All they need to do is act quickly. The other brother of JonBenet was a key suspect, but how does he see things? Burke Ramsey, brother of JonBenet Ramsey, had a 3-part interview on Dr. Phil that made waves after he had remained silent for nearly 3 decades. Since the tragic events of 1996, this was his initial public comment. Despite requests from Netflix and other documentaries, he politely declined to be interviewed, Burke said. "If the story is going to be told, I want to tell it," in response to a question about his decision to speak up at last. "I would prefer it if no one mentioned me." His remarks demonstrate his determination to regain control of the storyline following years of intense media attention. The media initially reported that Burke had threatened his sister with physical harm, but during the interview, he disputed the accusation. His response was exact. Not at all. He revealed that he remained in bed on the fateful morning, convinced that his sister was trying to hide. His interrogations by the police were also covered in detail in the interview. Burke, at the tender age of 9, was both bewildered and terrified. His timidity led the police to mistake his smiles for signs of guilt whenever he was interrogated. However, he clarified that it was just an anxious reaction, accompanied by a sensation of unease. Dr. Phil led Burke through the 911 call in the interview, playing previously unaired audio and asking him why he stayed in bed while his family and the police were downstairs. He also touched on his shocking conclusion that his sister was gone forever. To add to the hope that the case will be solved at last, Burke has put forth his own theory regarding it. He blamed a paedophile or predator with an unhealthy obsession with beauty pageants rather than his family for his sister's murder. He opened out about his optimism that the case would be solved in the end, particularly with the new DNA evidence. The Ramsey family is no longer being investigated in this case that has persisted for 30 years, thus it appears he is correct. The fact that the Ramsey parents, John and Patsy, were initially the main suspects in the JonBenet Ramsey mystery is one of the most peculiar parts of it. Due in part to the lack of evidence of forceful entry, investigators zeroed in on the family. On top of mentioning John's recent bonus, the ransom note was penned on home stationery. Even leads that hinted at potential intruders were disregarded due to the police investigation's myopic focus. They might have come up with more plausible leads if they had considered other possibilities, particularly in the route of an irrational fan or predator. But no, and the case persisted for 28 years. Thanks to cutting-edge DNA research, the riddle is nearly solved. The parents' innocence could be questioned, particularly considering that JonBenet was first hit by a large item, which fractured her skull before she was strangled with a garrote. Her parents probably wouldn't do such a horrific thing as murder her. The parents were on the verge of going to jail for child endangerment and accessory charges, but District Attorney Alex Hunter declined to press charges, citing a lack of evidence, according to an interview with Joe Bellinger, the documentary filmmaker of Cold Case, JonBenet Ramsey. When DNA testing in 2008 exonerated the Ramseys of any guilt, the criticism leveled up a notch. The results showed that the male DNA belonged to an unknown individual. After the fact, former District Attorney Mary Lacey publicly cleared the family, saying that they were the real victims. It was her contention that the authorities, in their haste to establish the guilt of the Ramseys, had disregarded crucial evidence that implicated others. By 2013, detectives had discovered distinct indicators of a male presence in the residence, leading them to conclude that an intruder theory was their primary line of inquiry. They were mostly concerned with the family at the moment, although there were over 1,600 potential persons of interest, such as neighborhood burglars, registered sex offenders, and pageant ties. The investigators weren't only fixated on the parents, they also had suspicions about 9-year-old Burke Ramsey, who was JonBenet's brother. Although Burke Ramsey was initially not considered a suspect, District Attorney Alex Hunter subsequently stated that Burke was never a suspect, but many still had suspicions about him, even news outlets. The case of JonBenet Ramsey was a documentary series that premiered on CBS in 2016. Burke, a 9-year-old, may have killed his sister after unintentionally hitting her with a flashlight during an argument about a pineapple, according to CBS experts. Evidence was presented by a prior incident in which Burke struck her with a golf club and by his conduct during interviews. The fingerprints of Burke were discovered on a bowl and a teacup, which led to the pineapple theory, which was the key piece of evidence. JonBenet's stomach contained an undigested pineapple. Experts from CBS say this could have been her last moments. His demeanor and composure while interrogated by the police were also mentioned. Still, Burke and his loved ones have vehemently refuted the accusations. Defamation was his response, and he went on to sue CBS and pathologist Werner Spitz, resulting in settlements that are kept confidential. For the first time in public, Burke stated categorically that there would be no proof of that happening. He told Dr. Fell that he thinks an invader who was too preoccupied with beauty pageants killed his sister. Some people still think the Burke did it idea makes sense. Whether he committed the deed of strangling his sister after beating her or not is debatable. Some think he was too young, while others think he did, and his guardians fabricated the situation to shield him. Have you any thoughts? Leave a comment and share your ideas. Despite the fact that the parents were the center of attention, the contamination of the murder scene ruined the JonBenet Ramsey case and the inquiry that followed. The police simply barricaded JonBenet's bedroom upon their arrival, letting his loved ones and investigators roam freely throughout the rest of the property. They ruined the forensic evidence by handling it, washing surfaces, and even moving JonBenet's body. Actually, her dad didn't call the cops downstairs after finding her death, he just dragged her upstairs. During the investigation, the cops also violated protocol. They failed to reach the basement, which is where her father located JonBenet in the hours after the 911 call. The use of crime scene dogs and the immediate sealing off of the entire site were both neglected. In addition, the incident happened around Christmas time, when departments were understaffed and there was a lot of confusion. Former Police Chief Mark Beckner acknowledged that the inquiry was mishandled and went in the wrong direction. Worse, none of the crucial artifacts like the garrote, ransom note, rope and flashlight have been retested using modern forensic techniques, and some of them may even be lost. The ransom note is one of the investigation's enigmas that the police have so far failed to unravel. As soon as Patsy Ramsey found the notorious 3-page ransom note on the stairs on Christmas morning, suspicions of personal knowledge were immediately raised because the demand was $118,000, 0 cents, the same amount of John Ramsey's bonus. The note, which was penned on house stationery using Patsy's pen, was abnormally lengthy, formal and dramatic. It contained references to Dirty Harry and Speed, threats of beheading, and signatures such as SBTC. Because it seemed so out of the ordinary, they began to doubt its veracity and wondered whether someone had planted it there to muddy the waters of the investigation or was trying to take advantage of John Ramsey financially. For a long time, experts have argued about where handwriting actually originated. People started tying it to Patsy. Some people thought a criminal imposter was behind its composition. Jason Jensen, a private investigator from Utah, speculated that SBTC might be a local invader, referring to academic jargon used by students at the University of Colorado Boulder. Psychologists who specialize in profiling people write these notes and think they are fake kidnapping notes meant to confuse police. The peculiar wording, "suggest you to be arrested," has linguists pointing out that it doesn't fit the profile of actual kidnappers. The police thoroughly examined the crime scene, looking for further clues in addition to the ransom note. Despite the contamination of the crime scene, some evidence remained. It is the hope of JonBenet's family that the authorities will re-evaluate this evidence in the hopes of finding a final solution to the mystery. A scuff mark beneath an open basement window, leaves and packing peanuts inside, as well as a bag tucked under the window, led investigators to believe that an intruder may have gained access. There was no match for any relative in a high-tech boot print found close to JonBenet's corpse. In addition, a paintbrush handle that belonged to Patsy's art materials, which was discovered strangling JonBenet. On her wrist was also observed a rudimentary ligature that matched. Additionally, there was an unusually large amount of DNA, especially considering the length of time that had passed with no resolution to the case. A variety of sites, including beneath her fingernails, undergrot, long johns, and wrist cord, produced male DNA that did not match the Ramseys. However, the identity of the DNA's owner remains a mystery. There were further traces as well. The entryway to the wine cellar bore the mark of a palm tree. A latex glove was discovered in the surrounding trash. Green Christmas garland strands were discovered in her hair, and the duct tape covering her mouth was sourced from an unknown source. The media was busy casting doubt on the Ramsey family, while police attempted to investigate the death of JonBenet Ramsey. The murder trial of JonBenet Ramsey swiftly morphed from a serious news story into a television trial. Instead of focusing on proven facts, most cable news and tabloids sensationalized the tragedy to generate ratings. Notably, the Geraldo Rivera show's mock trial in 1997 erected Patsy and John Ramsey's convictions before to any formal verdict, muddying the line between fun and supposed guilt. After the incident, Rivera apologized publicly for the damage she caused. The family was further demonized by the tabloids for their implausible accusations. It was later proven that the accusations of John's misbehavior and Patsy's coercion of JonBenet into pageants were unfounded. Burke Ramsey, who was only 9 years old at the time, was even caught up in the media's intense focus, and his anxious expressions were misconstrued as signs of guilt. Critics and journalists like Michael Tracy have criticised the coverage, calling it a media assassination and a public lynching, and pointing out that the focus was on unsubstantiated supposition rather than the reality, stomping on the innocence presumption. Public opinion was distorted, and the tragedy became a spectacle due to the incessant coverage of the Ramsey family, which some argue fostered an atmosphere where injustice flourished. The Ramsey family has persevered through thick and thin, finding happiness in other areas of life while they hunt for answers about their daughter's murder. JonBenet is still a major player in this investigation, JonBenet has persisted in calling for further DNA testing and for the government to reopen the investigation into his daughter's death ever since his wife and Patsy, John's mother, died away in 2006. He is married to Jan Rousseau, his third wife, and shares his time between Utah and Michigan. He is still hoping that outside specialists and contemporary forensic methods can deliver justice. Burke Ramsey, who has maintained a low profile since earning a degree in computer and information technology from Purdue University, is currently employed in Michigan as a software engineer. He has a wife and children and prefers to keep a low profile. Despite his 2016 appearance on Dr. Phil, he chose not to participate in the Netflix documentary series in defense of himself and in favor of the intruder hypothesis. JonBenet's first marriage produced a half-brother named John Andrew Ramsey. He has criticized the police's handling of the case repeatedly and called for a DNA-gapped probe. He also made an appearance in the Netflix documentary series. Now that JonBenet's family is back on the case, their one concern is that the authorities get new DNA evidence and track down the true killer. Authorities now need only retest the DNA to provide the Ramsey family with answers, as all the pieces have finally fallen into place. In your opinion, which of these explanations for JonBenet's murder is more plausible? Tell us in the comments section. Please return another time. We appreciate you tuning in.